Well, hello there, and a good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to the channel. If you're a new person or new visitor to the channel, if you're a returning visitor, welcome back. Thank you, new and old, for joining me today. I'll just run through the process of what happens with the videos here for the newbies, of course, who won't be familiar with the fact that, yeah, look, I do transcripts. I try and stick to them as best as possible, but I will quite regularly run off on a tangent because I like to share experience and encourage people to share their experiences with me for the greater good, if you like, of everybody that visits the channel, just as part of enhancing our knowledge. Anyway, for these reasons, because I can go down and have a bit of a waffle, I put timing stamps in the description so you can just jump to the areas of interest for you, because sometimes the videos can run a bit long. The other thing is, quite often I stop and start with the recording of the audios, and this is because, fact of the matter is I record stuff at home in my, time that's available, and of course there becomes interruptions, and that can include my little doggy who's looking at me right now, getting ready to go and do zoomies with his squeaky toy. So anyway, where I'm going with this is sometimes it can be a bit inconsistent with the volume. My apologies in advance for that. And just a reminder, I invite everybody to share their experiences. I'm very grateful. If you like any of the content or you find anything useful of value to you, if you could give us a thumbs up, thank you. That would be very helpful because it helps to keep me motivated. Anyway, without further ado, today's topic, today's crystal that we're looking at is Staurolite. And Staurolite is another one of my very favourite crystals, and I used to have it as part of my collection many years ago. If you're new to the channel, you won't know. I used to be a collector and a seller of crystals, and then I stopped. Life got in the way. I went to university and that kind of thing. Anyway, in the process, I lost my collection. Long story, not going to go there, and I'm having to rebuild. But Staurolite was definitely one of mine back in the day, and I had received a piece that was gifted to me by an Australian prospector. Anyway, in the course of making this video, I have become more current, I guess, with what's happening on the market through modern times, and it's quite I find it quite interesting and disturbing at the same time. So in the first instance, we're talking about a stone or a crystal, whatever you want to call it, that has this darker cross in the center. Now, this is an example of it. I believe this one to be genuine when I look at it. The piece that I had was different because it was Australian, and I used to describe it back in the day that the crystal chiastolite had a white cross in it, and Staurolite had a darker cross in it, but with the white background or lighter coloured background, because it's not pure white. The one that I had actually was probably a light brown, tannish background with a very dark black cross in the centre of it. So you do get variations, but the defining feature of Staurolite is that you have this darker cross against the white background. And to be honest, when I did the video on chiastolite, which is the other cross stone, also known as a fairy cross, and I forgot to mention that on the other slide, is that when we talk about Staurolite, it's got a couple of different names. One of them is the fairy cross. Anyway, when I did the chiastolite video, I don't think I made reference to the cross symbolism, and this is very relevant to any of these fairy cross type rocks, because the cross has symbolism in itself. And I think it's remiss of me to mention the cross symbolism in the past, because this is part of the energetic properties of the crystal or the stone itself, in the same way that if we have a crystal that's carved into an animal, we can get animal symbolism and wisdom from a crystal as well. Well, the cross is naturally forming in Staurolite and chiastolite, and so it carries extra significance. Okay, so I'm going to refer to my transcript here, okay, is that generally speaking, the cross has got multiple references across multiple cultures, and many people will assume when we think of the cross, we're looking at a cross like this because it's been adopted by the Christian faiths and is associated with Jesus Christ and the crucifixion, of course. However, The cross has got a very long history that goes back at least to the Babylonians and the Chaldeans, and it was used as a symbol to represent the god Tammuz. I'm not sure about my pronunciation here, because apparently his name, and I might not be correct with all of this. Okay, this is my research that I had to do for this. His name was Tau, or whatever, Tau, and the initial of his name was apparently a cross, including throughout Egypt. Okay, so anyway, going back to Tammuz, or Tau, the mystic Tau, he was the god of agriculture, shepherds, and fertility. He was also the consort of the goddess Ishtar. And I guess the significance for us as we translate this into more modern times is that he was associated with the 4 seasons of life and the annual life cycle, of course, because that's what is the seasons represent an annual year. And so then we have that life cycle across the year. And the symbolism of it was that there was the death of vegetation in the summer months, and then in the spring there was a rebirth of the vegetation, getting ready for harvest and that kind of things. So it would make sense to me that the Christians probably didn't adopt the symbol of the cross initially, because it was also associated with the act of procreation and, for want of a better word, sex, the old sex word, and of course, if you know much about some of the, I don't know if it was early Christian beginnings, but somewhere along the way, having been raised in a Christian family as well, there was, not just Christians actually, a lot of the religions believed that any kind of procreation activities should be purely for procreation and not for fun. So they became a bit of a taboo subject, is where I'm going. Anyway, so at the same time, you can also understand why it wasn't initially adopted, because this concept went against, I suppose, their Christian values. At some point in time, it was decided that the idea of the death and rebirth being the resurrection of Christ for the Christians, that the cross was certainly a suitable symbol for them. Anyway, the other thing that is worth referencing for us who collect the crystals and who want Staurolite is because, I've got to say that I developed this understanding from holding the crystal, actually, when I had it. But when I've done my research, it's sort of reinforced with the concept of Tammuz. Okay, so I would say when you hold the actual naturally formed, unpolished, unrefined Staurolite, there becomes this sensation of sacredness associated with it. And so with Tammuz, he was also linked, one of his I suppose attributes or whatever was prayer, and the process of starting prayer from a space of gratitude. So if you're a Christian praise the Lord type of approaches to any form of interaction that we might try and have with the higher powers, a really reverent approach to faith, starting with praise, then sort of in the middle of giving gratitude for blessings, and then praising the Creator, then putting in a request of, which is what tends to happen with prayer, can you help me with X, Y, and Z, and following with gratitude, if you like. So you may as well say it's the prayer is a process of admiration and worship. Okay, so for other cultures, the cross represents the elements of earth, wind, fire, and water, as opposed to the seasons, and even the directions such as northeast, south, and west. Now, these representations tend to be, even today, associated with some of the what we call pagan religions, and they have great meaning. Okay, so the elements are associated with life, and aspects of life. For passion being fire associated, emotions being associated with water, thinking and rational processing or thoughts and even grounding actually can be associated, well, actually not so much grounding. Grounding's probably the earth-based aspect, whereas wind and air is associated with the thoughts and that kind of thing. What else have I got in my notes here? So within the context of the Chinese cultural history, yes, there was yin and yang, but if you look at the feng shui symbol, you will actually see that it also represents the elements, as I mentioned, wind, air, fire, earth, that kind of that wind and air, water, air, fire, and earth. However, going back to the directions, we're also, let me think how to articulate this. Look, certain branches of Christianity do include directions, as in northeast, south, and west, as part of their faith-based practices. I don't know if it's mainstream religion or Christian religions, but I do recall one healing angelic meditation, if you like, which involved the formation of a cross by spirit and entity. And then there is angels of the north, east, south, and west that are supposed to be guardians, things like that. What else have I got here as far as notes go? Just, you can see where those Christian faiths that do incorporate the aspects of the directions. The meditation that I did some years ago was where it was a case of almost prayer, but it's a visualized activity. And if I recall correctly, it was a meditation or healing meditation delivered by Sylvia Brown. And in it, and I'm really drawing on my memory here, it was a case of that we were attempting to connect with the Creator, and Jesus walked at the front, if I believe my memory serves me correctly, or maybe it was the guardian, but there was the guardian angel and there was Jesus, Joseph, and Mary. Interesting, because we're talking about Staurolite, which is the which is the Christian faith. Sorry, the reason I laughed at that Jesus, Joseph, and Mary is because from a cultural implication, the fairy cross is very much associated with Ireland, and their approach to spirituality, which, you think Jesus, Joseph, Mary, and you think of the Irish going, Jesus, Joseph, Mary, But anyway, the cross is also indicative, if we needed to say that, of the Holy Trinity. And when you think about Christians genuflecting, remember they will hold their prayer hands in front of the heart chakra, if we're talking about chakras, and then they will touch their head, as in what we would call the third eye, and then they go, they put a hand onto the left and right shoulders before saying amen at the end of the prayer. But it's all about very respectful sacredness, connection, and communication with God, created by whatever name you call them. Now, speaking of chakras, okay, when it comes to Staurolite, because we're talking about, and let's say this figure here, northeast, south, and west, what we're talking about is a crystal that potentially aligns the entirety of the chakra system while anchoring. It's, my understanding is it works, or one of its primary attributes is this capacity to anchor a person to Mother Earth, the extreme grounding, if you like, for practical decision making as we walk the life path, but also at the same time connecting a person to the infinite, the divine creator, if you like, the heavens aspect of life. And so then you've got, if you're in balance, which this is what Staurolite is going to support. We'll look at the metaphysical attributes in a moment. Then you've got that purification of your aura system as well as your chakra system. Now, I would also say that if you haven't worked with Staurolite, that potentially it could activate the Kundalini chakras as well as the base chakras if you haven't actually activated them already. And of course, when you talk about the heart chakra, there's a potential there to really open up to receive that divine love that comes from the Creator, Mother Earth type thing, which encourages the conversion of unforgiveness and unkind thoughts into positive, loving, forgiving type thoughts. So it links the mind to the heart chakra as well. This is my belief, of course. You might have a different belief. Now, when it comes to the metaphysical properties, this is where the Irish comes in and what I gravitate to, because, it's quite funny, a little bit of personal information here. My approach to spirituality and energy and all the rest of it turns out to be quite Irish in its approach. And I knew that I had Irish ancestry. And with my DNA, it turns out I've got about, even though I'm 6 generations Australian, that I'm about 80% Irish. And many, many years ago, a lady who was born in Ireland and has the Irish ancestry all through had turned around and said to me that being Irish is in the blood, which of course I kind of scoffed at the time. Turns out I was incorrect. Anyway, where I'm going with this is my understanding and associations for Staurolite is very much linked to the Irish concepts of the fairy bridge, okay, which is why it's called the fairy cross. It is believed to be, and certainly by me, to be a stone of bridging the physical reality with the higher spiritual reality and realms. So, that being the case, it's definitely associated with transformation and transition. We can call that transition from one stage of life to the other, and this is as we're still embodied, but it also can be a stone of transition when somebody's passing from the earthly life to the spiritual life. So when we're talking about transformation within our current existence, we're talking about new beginnings and a rebirth, and at the very least, a spiritual development and growth with this heightened understanding. It certainly promotes, as I said, when you hold it in your hand, for me anyway, it provoked is probably not a bad word, promoted this reverence and even inspired a level of awe about the sacredness of life. The fact that Mother Earth, I don't believe that we find crystals like this by accident, that there's any accident, although scientists would say, oh, it's just, uh, a random occurrence that the stones have formed this way. Well, Staurolite is quite rare, actually, when you have the fairy bridge, just so you know. Anyway, it does promote inner peace, connection and communication. It's believed to enhance relationships. And also, if you're unaware of what your actual talents and gifts are, or even your divine purpose or pathway, then it's going to be associated with the revelations of those. So, returning visitors will know my attitude to associations of crystals with the Zodiac, which basically is that I don't feel that it has any relevance whatsoever. But there are people that believe differently. I'm not sure why. But to me, if you're drawn to a crystal, then that's the crystal that you need for you. I guess the difference is that we have to learn, do we need a crystal, or are we just wanting it as part of our collection? If you're a crystal enthusiast like what I am, then I want them all, whether I need them or not. I've got such a love for them. And so I have to exert a little bit of self-discipline there. Um, and I also encourage people, so this is for the newbies, that rather than just deciding that you want to have a crystal and buying online, you're actually better off to go into a shop and handle them, because quite often what happens is, for example, you might decide that you want Staurolite as a prime example, and it's recommended for you because you're a Pisces star sign. But there's 2 points with this, and one is that you get in there and you might be gravitating towards having a crystal called the fairy cross, but you might actually be more drawn to chiastolite, which is also a fairy cross stone. And so when you hold both of them in your hand, you might feel the vibration, if you like, towards chiastolite. So if you were buying online, you might buy Staurolite when it's actually chiastolite that you personally need. The other thing is too that if you're not a Pisces and you go into a store and you find yourself, excuse me as I choke, you find yourself in front of the Staurolite, you decide that actually you can't go home without a piece because it's resonating or it's calling to you. So where I'm going with this is, don't let your star sign dictate your purchases. If you must buy online, establish whether you feel you need it or whether you just want it, because there is a difference. So, from a mineral perspective, and this is relevant to any of us that are considering particularly buying online, um, it helps us to identify what is fake and what isn't. And to be honest, I would say it's actually quite difficult to sort the chaff from the hay when we're looking online with Staurolite. So, I've got some buying tips in a moment, but look, the bottom line is that from a hardness perspective, Staurolite is rated at 7 to 7.5. From the colour perspective, it can be black, brown, or red. And when we talk about that colouring, we're talking about the actual cross. When we look at the image that we've got here in a person's hand, we would call that, I guess in many ways, we might call that a Staurolite on a host rock. The difference is the one that I had, I think because it was black, it probably, without me being a mineral expert, because I'm not a geologist or anything like that, it was just a gift from a prospector, I would say it would have had a high iron content. And if you look at the mineral information here that I managed to gather, it is iron, aluminium, and silicon. So mine, from hindsight, it really looked like a rock. It didn't look like a cross sitting on a piece of granite, which is kind of what this image looks like. It looks a bit sandy, the host rock, I will call it. For mine, it actually looked like it was a black cross embedded perhaps in some dirty quartz. And this is because the way I explain that is the area that I met the prospector in was actually the goldfields of Western Australia. And I'm not sure where he got his piece from, but quite often we would see white quartz that would have the colour of the landscape in it. And of course, the dirt up there is a really reddish brownish type colour. So what I would call the white aspect of my Staurolite seemed to be a dirty white, for want of a better description, with the black cross in the middle of it. However, there is a big however on this. That prospector I know used to go into the Territory and the far north as well, and I'm not actually sure where he sourced his Staurolite from that he gifted to me kindly. Anyway, as far as locations and where you can find Staurolite, that's also going to influence what Staurolite looks like, because it's all about the soil that the stuff grows in. So anyway, it is found in the US, Chile, Russia, Switzerland, France, Norway, Brazil, Australia already mentioned, and Scotland apparently. This was all new to me. If you know of any other areas where it can be found, do let us know. And, it'd be helpful. You can always send me a message through the website that I've got, lorenaslabyrinth.com. I've got a contact form there, and I will definitely respond. And sometimes people send me photographs of the minerals that they've got locally to them. Just another useless piece of information, if people are interested, is that Staurolite got its name from the Greek word staurus, which means cross, apparently. Now, as far as buying tips go, I'm probably going to have to hand over to you guys as well, because there is some stuff, when I look at these examples that I've managed to find online, I'm actually not sure if they're genuine or not. And by that, I mean the ones on the left hand up the top, the three of them together. I mean, I don't know if somebody's created a type of cement and then shoved I really don't know. Look, I would have to imagine that they actually are the genuine article. But of course, I'd love to have confirmation. I don't know where you find them in this form. What I have done, though, is added some other images, because this is why I say it's a little bit concerning for me, because of what people do to crystals, I guess. You know what I mean? I love crystals in their natural, beautiful state. I'm very much a person with that concept of the perfect imperfection. And so if a crystal's got flaws, I don't look at it as being less than any other type of crystal. But, so I don't understand. I'll be quite honest, I don't understand why, if you look at the second image on the left, why they have taken the fairy cross out of the actual host setting, if you like. To me, it's almost disrespectful. And not only that, it's when you've got the contrast of the cross against the lighter background, um, it represents to me the yin yang. It carries the balance attributes. Whereas if you take away that background rock, or what we might call the host rock, it's no longer balanced. You're just looking at, I suppose, a lump of bridge. I don't know. But anyway, look, chiastolite, I put an image up there so that you can actually see the difference between chiastolite and staurolite, because they're both called fairy cross or fairy bridge. And the chiastolite here, I actually have some of it. I managed to order some. Mine is from China, and this is what the Chinese one looks like. And I would actually say, funnily enough, the piece of staurolite that I had in the past, when I talk about the dirty white background, it was probably about the same hues as what we see here in the chiastolite, a little bit lighter coloured than that, but definitely the cross part of it was very much like what we see in the image on the right-hand side. So that was my staurolite as a I suppose description. Anyway, the idea is when I put these images up that you're able to take a look at them and identify, is that a genuine piece, is it not? One of the things that I say disturbing, which is why I've got the big red mark on it, is that those pendants are being marketed as staurolite. Or, get a load of this, I find it somewhat humorous, is it a stropholite they were being marketed as garnet in staurolite. Well, I can give you the tip here that if there is no twinning of the rocks, I forgot to mention that on the mineral slide, that what defines staurolite from anything else is that you must have the twinning on it, okay? That is the twin of the cross, one crossing over the other, and that's how it forms. Now, you will find pieces of staurolite that have got more than the cross. They might have little branches coming out as well, all of that kind of thing. They're still staurolite if they have that twinning arms, okay, the cross within. However, if you have something like that pendant, I think blind Freddy can see there is no twinning there, okay? So that is absolutely not staurolite. That is a mineral, okay? It might have iron in it, it might have silica in it, it might have garnet, it might whatever, but it is not staurolite because it doesn't have the twinning. Okay, so we've established that now. I'd love to get some feedback on that image on the left. Really? Do people really destroy rocks in that way? And to what purpose do they do that? Is that because it's supposed to look better on a pendant? I really don't know. But anyway, going back to it, yes, apparently there is fake staurolite on the market. And so some tips here was that um, look at the way it's formed, right? If it's on that background with the white and all the rest of it, there should be no bubbles in the stone, okay? That's apparently one of the big factors for identifying the fake. I saw one, and I actually did it as a rush, and I realised it the other day when I was doing the yarning, and I'd just taken an image and put it up, and it looked like, actually, to be quite honest, a fairy cake. It was just so perfectly formed, and even had almost like a cherry on top, Very beautiful crystal, great ornament, but not necessarily staurolite. Looked too fake to me. Oh, and that is the other thing, apparently. When it comes to staurolite, they're not perfect. Okay, that's the whole thing. It's not going to be um, mathematically perfect, as per a cross that we might have seen in that blue slide of the Christian cross. It's not going to have perfect shape and form, which is why I question the reddish looking staurolite in the bottom left image, because to me, the patterning of that looks too perfect. The one on the right, however, looks to be, well, I would say more genuine because it is imperfect. And, nature can be, well, most of the time it is imperfect. So anyway, that's apparently one of the keys for identifying fake from authentic is that if it's too perfect, it's not genuine. Beyond that, of course, if you're going to be buying online, and you think you're willing to take the chance that what you're buying is the genuine article, then you would look at currency conversions. If you're buying off a platform, any hidden fees, any extra costs. You want to know the weight, the size, the dimensions. You also want to know freight costs as well, because the freight costs can be absolutely exorbitant. Anyway, if you've got any more suggestions, let us know. So when it comes to the spiritual attributes, this is really where I believe Staurolite comes into its own. And so for these reasons, I've called it a stone of reverence, which is aligned with the attributes of the cross that we talked about, the sacredness of prayer, the respect for the divinity, if we like, of the divine spark that's between all of us. It is one of the few crystals that has the capacity to connect a person, I would say, fairly strongly with the energy of the universe, whether that's Mother Earth, the Mother Nature, the Nature Kingdom, being able to feel connected to the earth elementals as well as to the higher realms. If you're seeking to connect with your guides and guardians, for example, certainly it would be a crystal that you could use for protection. Certainly, most definitely for anchoring to the earth energy. Now, if you watched my yarning video that I loaded yesterday, which is 2nd of November, actually is the name of it, I talk about clairsentience and the need to have a strong grounding. If you're going to go up to the higher realms and connect with the guides and guardians, you're raising your light vibration. And we have to have a balance there, because we can go high and we can go low. And so therefore there needs to be a moderating factor there, and so this is what Staurolite can offer, I believe. It's I'll let you look at a lot of these. Certainly it will open and activate a lot of the chakras, the psychic gifts, that kind of thing. It is associated, I believe, with the purple ray of transformation, which brings in things like miracles. If you're wanting to get messages from your higher self aspect or your guides and guardians through the dream state, it's going to promote that. It would be very recommended for those people that are in a process of transition, as in death and dying. If you had a piece, you could put it on their bedside table or whatever, for what we call ease of transition, especially if they're lingering and in pain. When it comes to the past life stuff, there is that recollection. It's not always about previous lives. It can be about acknowledging and healing any of the experiences that we've had in the past in our current life. Certainly, it would be a crystal that promotes access to the ancient wisdom and the universal knowledge. And of course, it's believed to bring luck and good fortune. So from a physical perspective, we have to, in the first instance, acknowledge that there is nothing to support that any of the claims made about a crystal being useful for any physical health symptoms, that there's any level of accuracy with it, So you would be encouraged to keep an open mind, to ensure that you stay engaged with your treating professionals, whether they're mental health or whether they are physical health professionals. But you could, with this open mind, use your crystals in conjunction as a complement to any treatments that you're getting. When it comes to the physical attributes of Staurolite, these are not part of my experience. This is based on the research. If you're talking about a crystal that goes through all the chakras, you're basically saying it could treat any health condition if you were into the physical attributes. But these are the ones that it's recommended for, which is the addiction. I always keep the addiction as a physical health issue, because addictions might have an emotional cause to them, but there becomes this repatterning or the neural pathways, and even physiological symptoms of addiction as well. So it's not just about mind, it is about emotions. There is a physical aspect to addiction. And of course, that lies in the brain, the nerves and the neural pathways. But other attributes, of course, include cells, cellular creation, the formation of them, and the health of the cells. It's recommended apparently for children to support good mental and physical growth. And if people suffer from circulatory system disorders such as blood flow, your red cells, that will be associated actually with the mineral iron as well, and oxygenation of the cells. Detoxification is another one of them. What I find interesting is it's supposed to treat and soothe the symptoms of malaria, because apparently it's got properties to reduce inflammation and fever. And of course, malaria is associated with fever. It's also recommended for hormones in women. I have to wonder whether or not that's because if the Staurolite has the iron cross in it. So I'm interested in your thoughts with this. It's believed to support muscle and tendons health, to strengthen them. I haven't put on here, but I think it would be relevant that it's probably good if people have got bone disorders or lacking in calcium, you know, or osteoporosis, things like that. It's supposed to help with nutrient absorption, and if people suffer from pain, it's supposed to relieve the pain. Apparently, if you've got chronic illness or disease, it's supposed to help recover from, and it's supposed to benefit the pituitary and the adrenal glands. So if you've been living with a lot of stress, you would probably, based on this, benefit from working with Staurolite. And another one, it's supposed to be helpful for women and their PMS, PMT, and symptoms of menopause. So I'll be brief with the emotional and mental attributes as well, because obviously there's a lot of them there, but it instills a sense of inner peace. And I would say not just love of Mother Earth or the environment and respect for the environment, it kind of instills a sense of awe, actually, as well as inner peace. Certainly in my experience. And so it promotes a lot of these positive attributes, recommended for people that have got mood swings and that kind of thing. Just to be clear here, I do believe if it's being recommended, or if somebody suffers from mood disorders, then they don't want to have the Staurolite cross away from the host, if that makes sense. The balance comes in where you've got the white with the darker Staurolite, which could be the red, it could be the black. So you want to have that yin yang aspect to it. Said to promote love, as in compassion, mercy, kindness, forgiveness, and unconditional love as well. And also the connectivity, I think, is worth mentioning. A lot of the time people feel extremely isolated these days, particularly since COVID. So it helps to bridge those connections, if you like, to feel connected across all levels, feel purposeful, feel like there's meaning in the life, even if you don't understand what that purpose is, because that's part of the spiritual attributes, is the revelations of what your purpose is. So there is that process of feeling that life has got more meaning, feeling connected not just to your guides and guardians and to earth and nature, but also connected to the people around you, having that social networking. I'm interested once again in your feedback. If you're trying to manifest, I forgot to mention this, it's going to promote that planning and organisation. I would even say, and holding the vision of what it is that you're attempting to manifest as well, through the focus and concentration. So yes, it would be recommended for manifestation, and if you're in need of a miracle. Of course, the way you use your Staurolite is going to be determined by what it is you're using it for. So if you're looking to energize your environment or whatever, well, yes, you would put it in the space that you're living in. And if that's to create better bonds of connection and relationship, calming and balance and that kind of thing, then you would put it in your primary living areas. If you're a metaphysical worker and a healer and you have a client base, then you would perhaps put it in your healing room. If you're just trying to raise your vibration, when I say just, I'm not minimizing it, but if you were looking to embed any of the spiritual attributes into your daily life, such as connecting to Mother Earth, then you could meditate with it. You could hold your piece in your hand. Now, you could do that if you're trying to connect to Mother Earth, then you would basically be encouraged to do that outside and in the garden, and somewhere where you're not going to necessarily be interrupted. You can do it in public spaces, by the way. if you're able to tune out the external noises. And by that, I mean like at the park or somewhere like that. And then if you're trying to connect to the higher realms, your guides or your guardians, you could perhaps hold it while you're doing a guided visualization or a meditation where you just focus on the breath and allow it to unfold. You can see here that, yes, sometimes it's converted into a jewelry type ornament, and you could wear that as a protective amulet if that's what you're into. I don't know that I would recommend it for elixirs, and that's simply because there might be toxicity with it, and I'm not sure. I didn't see any. I didn't see anything about trace minerals in there that might be toxic, but not knowing where you might get your Staurolite from, there may actually be trace minerals in there. What was the other thing I was going to mention? As far as mine was concerned, mine was in the rock form. It was natural state, and so I think I used to keep mine in the living area when I had it. But if I was trying to work on the dream recollection, the recall, and do past life healing, hold it while you're doing a past life healing activity. For dreams, pop a piece under your pillow or on your bedside table would be a good way of using it. From a message perspective, this is where the Irish roots in me come through, actually, which is because when we talk about fairy crosses and fairy stones, that's also associated with what I know as the rainbow bridge. And some people call it the fairy rainbow. And it really is a case of building the bridge. And we could say building the bridge and getting over whatever's happening in your life that's not necessarily pleasant or hasn't been pleasant to experience as you're going through it. But certainly it's transformational and healing. So within that aspect, when we talk about meditating with a crystal, you kind of think, or there's this preconception that you've got to sit there with your eyes closed and focus totally on your heart chakra. When it comes to building the rainbow bridge and connecting with your environment and Mother Nature and the fairy kingdom, if we want to call it that, it can be done with your eyes open, and it's creating this sense of awareness of the miracle of nature and just how stunning and amazing it is. That everything is a divine idea. It's about noticing the little things, which could be the perfection of a petal, the perfection of a leaf, the bark of a tree, you know what I mean? And really allowing yourself to feel that awe at the beauty of life, that divine design, and feeling that gratitude. And to start with, it would be a case of extending gratitude for being on this earth plane and thanking and acknowledging the teamwork that goes into creating these miracles of life, shall we say. This is a really good way to anchor the energy. And as you do that anchoring, because there's a series of steps, if you like. It doesn't all have to be done at once. It depends on where you are in your journey. But you send that love out. The rainbow bridge also connects you to the higher realm. So then you would sort of take it to the extent of where you are basically the bobbin on a piece of cotton. So you are centered and grounded while also being connected to the higher realms, if that makes sense. So if you were a cotton reel, visualizing yourself as that cotton reel with an equal balance of a cord running upwards and a cord running down. I don't know if you've got questions about that and like me to clarify it a bit more. Just leave a comment. And this is one of the strategies that I'll be putting up on my website under centering and grounding. When it comes to Staurolite, the way that you're going to care for it is going to be determined by where you've got your piece from. The piece that I had was very hardy, shall we say. What I've seen is that none of Staurolite is particularly soft. It's going to have a certain capacity and tolerance, I guess, for a bit of rough handling. Mine looked more like a stone, and therefore it could cope with water immersion, being put under the tap if it needed to be washed, which it didn't really, except if it gathered a bit of dust. As far as those jewellery items go, I think that I would be travelling with care with that. I don't think that I would be putting them in the special cleaners or using wire brushes. I'm not sure, because some crystals can actually be stained by environmental influences. So I'm not sure that I would want to expose it to chemicals. I would probably take it off if I need to go swimming in a chlorine pool, for example. Um, but generally speaking, rule of thumb, just avoid harsh chemicals. If you do feel that it needs to be cleansed and charged, you get from a metaphysical perspective, I always recommend the selenite. Those returning visitors will know that. And when it comes to that cleansing, recharging, and all the rest of it, yeah, smudging, whatever floats your boat, really. I've got a couple of videos up on how to do that. That's very generalistic. The other thing is, I do think it would tolerate being dropped on the bathroom floor most of the time, depending on what the host rock is made of. Mine definitely could, but at the same time, mine was too big a piece. I didn't put it in my bra. I might have put it in my pocket from time to time, but it just definitely wasn't one that was at risk of being dropped on the floor. But mine was really stone like. It felt like a stone. It looked like a stone. It just looked like a really pretty one. But anyway, if you've got any suggestions, by all means, leave a note, leave a comment for us, and that might help us out and just expand our pool of information. Anyway, my friends, that is about all I can share with you today in regard to Staurolite. So I'm just going to hand it over to you guys now and wait until I get some feedback or comments, and maybe we can expand upon it later. In the meantime, of course, if you've managed to stick around for this length of time, thank you very much for being part of my journey. Take care. Have a wonderful day, wonderful week. Blessings. See you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.